Okay, welcome Rod Giltaca to the Biodigital Convergence Transhumanist Report. Thanks so much, man, for giving us of your time. I've been following the CCFR for a very long time. I am a member, and I'm really grateful for guys like yourself, your group, and everyone that puts in an effort, you are Canada's gun lobby, as far as I'm concerned, and just fighting back against what I'm going to call somewhat of a neo-communist liberal gun grab. And I know you've got some really intelligent counters to what the liberals want to do legally, and you're holding back the reins of what I see as a very bad thing happening to law-abiding firearms owner in Canada. So first and foremost, welcome to the show. I want to read your bio here, so bear with us. Really important here. Rod Giltaca is the CEO and Executive Director of Canada's Gun Lobby, the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, the CCFR. Rod was also the first president of the organization starting in 2015. As an experienced Canadian entrepreneur, Rod's background includes over a decade of international business development in the manufacturing and software industries. Rod has registered intellectual property, founded venture finance startups, and engaged directly in business with some of the world's largest corporations and government bodies such as Ford Motor Company, AT&T, the United States Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. In addition to his other business activities, Mr. Giltaca previously owned and operated one of Canada's most recognizable training businesses, Civil Advantage Firearms Training. Civil Advantage Management, Inc. is what you have in brackets here. But in addition, Rod is an instructor in good standing with the RCMP Canadian Firearms Program, having trained over 4,000 students in the Canadian Firearms Safety Course and live fire training. In the early days of firearm-related YouTube, Rod produced and hosted the largest all-Canadian firearms channel, the Civil Advantage channel. Wow. In later years, he created, hosted, wrote, and produced numerous national broadcast television specials and series. Rod currently hosts and produces CCFR Radio on the Air, which is in its fourth season on Wild TV, as well as most popular firearm-related podcast in Canada, the CCFR Radio Podcast. The podcast is uploaded bi-weekly and can be found on the CCFR YouTube channel, Rumble, and Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and is rated in the top 5% of all podcasts on Spotify. Wow, good job, man. Rod has testified in both House and Senate committees on firearm legislation. He also interviews regularly on terrestrial radio and television media outlets such as CTV, CBC, Global, and others in an ongoing effort to represent licensed gun owners in the most positive light possible. Rod and the CCFR have defined what a gun lobby organization is. Forgive me, I'm losing my flow of thought there. What it does and how the public perceives it. Rod has been married to his lovely wife, Tracy, for 31 years. Wow. Congratulations, man. That's a huge accomplishment, I just have to say. Has two grown children and is a two-time cancer survivor. Rod enjoys a well-established national reputation as honest and reasonable communicator. Well, I can definitely see that from some of the material you put out there. A very respectful individual. I really like talking to individuals like yourself because I feel like people like yourself really help people that are kind of polarized in one way of thinking. So thanks a lot, Rod, for your time. A lot of respect for what you're doing out there, man. And yeah, welcome to the show. So first and foremost, let's dive into the first question. We've got about 8 questions here for him. So what is the CCFR and how was the group founded?
Okay, well, thanks for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it. The CCFR was a group that was formed back in 2015, and it was, I guess to be brutally honest, it was people, disaffected gun owners coming from other groups or from no groups at all, recognizing that there were some very serious gaps in the gun lobby's activity, I guess, in Canada, right? So, and again, to be honest, it's if you go to back in the day, right? If you went to a firearm forum or any of these kind of gathering places for gun owners, you'd see thousands of posts which are like, what we really need to do, what we need to do is this, what we need to do is that, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of great ideas there, and I think it just highlighted that, I think Canadian gun groups thought, okay, well, we'll look at the NRA. and try to apply what they did in, what they did in the United States to Canada, which doesn't work here. It's a completely different conversation. The legal system is different, the ways you acquire firearms, the fact that we don't have codified rights, none of that stuff is transferable. So I guess there was a lot of frustration in the community and people saying we're not getting anywhere. Maybe we need to do something different. So I was recruited by a handful of people that had just formed the corporation of the CCFR.
Hmm.
And I was recruited to be the first president. And so, we put some ideas together about what the most effective gun lobby, that we can imagine would be. And that was the CCFR, and we've been kind of working at that ever since. So just to give you some context,
Mhm.
there was not a lot of public relations work. Well, no public relations work at all being done by the current lobby from 2015, some basically from before the CCFR. And there was no public education. There was very little actual lobbying. There's some lobbying going on for sure. There's a whole bunch of gaps. So that's what the CCFR was bringing to the table, all the things that weren't being done. And it's just been quite an adventure ever since.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I get that. Yeah, a lot of us are looking to our neighbors down south, and like you just mentioned, you mentioned that our laws are very much different. Like we don't have 2A rights,
No.
so yeah, can you so I guess it's been a challenge, right? Because you're taking this on, beyond just having conversations obviously on social media and you're actually approaching this from, I would say, in the most legal way possible within the framework of the rule of law in Canada, right? I mean, can you just discuss a, a few of the challenges, that we're facing as Canadians that want to be and remain, armed, if you will, right? But also following the law and like speak a little bit to that. Like I have a really hard time with what's happened over the last 10 years with Trudeau, right? Like just some of the differences between, the United States, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm just kind of bridging out from question run there just to highlight the main differences that we're facing of the challenges legally between the USA and Canada.
Well, the United States has a long tradition of widespread firearm ownership. And the United States fought a civil war to protect that and other rights and to right other wrongs. Anyways, complicated. It's not why the
Yeah.
Civil War was fought, but you had like in the United States, it is a very cherished attribute of American society that the common person has the ability to have firearms, right? And it's
Yeah.
overt in the United States that the main purpose for those firearms is, well, really two things: self-defense and some kind of hedge against tyranny. And this was in the Constitution, because if the government became tyrannical, the public has some means to replace that government, even when the government doesn't want to go. So in Canada, it's very different. We don't have a codified right to have firearms. I mean, elites just love that. They just think this is the greatest thing in the world. And, you know, Canadian gun culture is different, and it always has been, in the fact that we don't like to say these things, that firearms are for purposes of self-defense or a hedge against tyranny or anything like that. They're for hunting, sport shooting, collecting, inheritance, these kinds of things, and they're an
Yeah.
important part of the Canadian social fabric. So the argument is completely different. Like in the United States, if you're talking about a gun group in the United States, when all the arguments are exhausted, the gun owners can just slap down on the table the Constitution, right? And Second Amendment is like, yeah, well, that's all good and fine, but bam, Second Amendment,
Yeah.
right? And I don't need to have this argument with you. It's my right. Well, that doesn't play in Canada. It doesn't play with
Yeah.
the population. Even the Americans that are anti-gun understand that argument. It's there in black and white, right? Like you can't deny it.
Yeah.
And if you have any respect for the Constitution, you have to respect the entire Constitution. Well, in Canada, we don't have that, and probably one of the worst Canadian virtues, I think, in my opinion, is Canadians get some kind of source of pride by being the opposite of everything that America is. It's like, well, we're not the United States and we don't do this like the States and the Americans do that, but we don't even, it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny. This arrogance is really showing up in the current election that's
Yeah.
going on, and it's almost like it's to Canadians. It's to their detriment, right? I mean,
I think
there's a
so.
lot of things that the United States does well.
Yep.
There's some things that have some pretty significant side effects. Like we'll get into the details because I think it's interesting. Because this is a question that gets asked, and there's never an opportunity to explore it in enough detail. In the United States, you don't need a license to own a firearm. You just have to be 18 in most states and not have a felony record. Well, the problem is that guns are dangerous. They are tools that can be dangerous, just like a motor vehicle is, right?
Mhm.
So in Canada, on the other hand, you have to at least pass some mandatory safety training so that you know how a gun works before you can get a license, right? And
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
and it's funny as gun owners, we just reject all rules now because we've been pushed so far. But if you just forget everywhere we've been pushed and you just actually approach it reasonably, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And I know that from real life because I've instructed thousands of people, and there were some people that I advised they just shouldn't own firearms because they couldn't stop pointing guns at people by accident. They couldn't keep their finger off the trigger. They couldn't
Yeah.
tell whether or not a gun was loaded, other than by pulling the trigger to find out. And of course, in the classroom, that's inert ammunition and
Yeah.
disabled firearms. But so there's some things that make sense in Canada that I think we do really well, and that the Americans don't do well. But at the same time, that lack of codified rights have put us down this road where we've lost almost everything in the last 10 years and most certainly in the last 5 years. So, should we have had codified rights? I think we should have had them, even if they're slightly conditional. But again, a right is something someone can never take away from you. So the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, garbage. You might as well just use it to mop up, some spilled milk on the kitchen floor. It's worthless because they're like, here's all your rights, unless the court decides you don't have them. So should we
Yeah.
have some codified rights, even if they're conditional? That'd be great. But yeah, all the arguments that work in the United States do not work in Canada. Um, and yeah, so it's a complicated situation, and thus it takes a different set of tactics and strategies to try to push this argument in Canada. It's a real challenge.
That's really well said, man. Yeah, that I mean, I totally agree with you. And it just seems that, honestly, like kind of something brewing in my heart that we need a new constitution or for Canada per se, I'd like to see it happen in a legal manner, right? Because I think the days of revolution, at least in North America, I think have come to an end, but I could be wrong, but yeah, thanks for your insights for that question. I think that's exactly how it is, and it's important for people to understand that here. So question number two is Bill C-21. Like, what does that legally mean for law-abiding firearms owners in Canada? Like, this is a relatively, and then we're getting, okay, I'll leave it at that first.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
legislation is complicated. So Bill C-21 means a lot of different things. There's the swatting law there, where anyone can anonymously report a gun owner for having committed some kind of offense, and the chief firearms officer of that province has to suspend that license. And of course, that leads to a lot of bad things that could happen to completely innocent, law-abiding citizens. At the same time, I understand why some people would support it because, just like when we're dealing with criminals, it's if somebody says, yeah, so and so broke into my house and they beat the tar out of me and took all my money.
Hmm.
The police have to act on that at some level, because if it's legitimate, that person could come right back and whatever, right? If it's illegitimate, they should have to go talk to the person. So the law actually still says in it that the chief firearms officer would have to reasonably believe that an offense was committed. But anyway, that there's some open interpretation there. The other thing, a couple of other things in Bill C-21, it now became legislated that you cannot transfer a restricted firearm, well, a handgun in particular. So that means that the market for handguns is over. Everyone that owns one can still use it as they did before, but they can't sell it, or you can't bequeath it, right? You can't pass it down to your kids. If you were to die, your firearms can be seized by the RCMP and destroyed with no compensation. Some of us out here got $30,000 worth of handguns and probably another $20,000 worth of accessories and ammunition and
Well,
holsters and all the rest of that stuff. So that's pretty bad. And that would have to be corrected by a majority government, or at
yeah.
least a minority government that has a coalition. So that's going to be very hard to change. And then one of the other interesting things that's more recent, has kind of reared its ugly head, was the government created a definition for assault style firearm.
Yeah.
And basically it's a long gun that is semi-automatic that can accept a magazine that was originally designed to accept more than 5 rounds. And so recently there was a firearm designed to comply entirely with that definition, to stay outside of it. So basically the government, fabricates these rules. Then industry says, okay, well, I can close my business and lose everything and my retirement, everything I've built, or I can just keep complying with the government and design something new. The government said
Yeah.
this is okay. So one of those firearms was the Crusader Arms Crypto, and it was designed with a proprietary magazine to accept only 5 rounds. In fact, the magazines are so tight, sometimes they'll only take 4, because Crusader Arms was being extremely careful. That firearm has been out for, I don't know, maybe a year. And the RCMP came and thought, well, you know what? We're just going to prohibit that anyway outside of actual law. So now you have all these people that bought this firearm in order just to comply, to play ball, in fact, to respect the
Well,
authority of the government. And then the government says, hey, suckers, too bad for you.
yeah.
Like they've done like literally hundreds of times since 2020. Go out and buy a replacement firearm, one that's not on the list. Everyone goes out and spends money. Then they're like, oh, yeah, these are banned now too. Serves you right for believing us. We're liars, right? You can't blame a snake for biting you. So they did the same thing just recently, just a few weeks ago, with a purposely designed firearm that was supposed to be compliant with the government and was. And they were like, no, we're going to ban it anyway, now that all of you people have bought it and believed us. So it's Bill C-21 is a mess. It's not having any demonstrable positive effect on public safety, obviously, because we know that licensed gun owners are they don't represent a disproportionate risk to public safety than anyone else. But yeah, it's an ugly bill. It's an ideological bill, just meant to discourage people so they give up all their guns voluntarily. And seems like it's working.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, because we really don't have, like 2A rights, like a constitution that gives us these rights. So yeah, I mean, they're playing the letter of the law against us, and it is working. I mean, it is working unless, I'm not sure whether you've spoken to Pierre Poilievre or the UCP about what you're doing. I'm just going to lead into this question. I mean, like, what do they have to say? I mean, I understand this kind of bridges into as well with, obviously, I would say the NDP and the Liberal government are probably totally on board with Bill C-21, and under the pretext, right, of course, of public safety, even though, like, I think you probably know some of the statistics, right, that like how are we doing in terms of like firearms related crime in Canada, since all this is rolled out? I know that's kind of like a multi-point question, but yeah, speak to that a little bit. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Canada's never been more dangerous than it is right now in recorded history. And when I say recorded history, that's as long as Stats Can has been keeping numbers on this kind of thing, which is since I think, mid 70s or late 70s.
Okay.
So, firearm related violence has gone through the roof. And the reason for this surge in gun crime is a couple of different things. It's a failing economy, because people just young men, let's say, in urban centers, take a look around. They're like, okay, well, I can go to work for $14 an hour at the gas
Yeah.
station, or I can get into selling drugs and extortion. And part of that job description is I'm going to have to shoot a couple people here and there, and I can't get a license, so I'm going to, buy firearms that have been smuggled across the border, or maybe I'll get into smuggling. buy a
Mhm.
drone and start smuggling, just flying drone loads of handguns across the border, which has been happening. There
Well,
was even a drone caught, right? And so that's the reality. And the liberals actually introduced and passed Bill C5 and Bill C75. Those things are making it easier for criminals to commit these crimes and then be out on bail within hours, not even 24 hours, right? So you have all of these career criminals that keep getting turned back on the street, even when they shoot people, even when they kill police, by the way, which is
yeah,
something that happened in Toronto where a guy just murdered a police officer in cold blood, and he's out on bail, right?
yeah, it's
So
unreal.
anyway, that's how you destroy public safety, and the liberals have done a fantastic job of that, and will be accountable and admit to nothing on that. They just
Yeah,
ignore it,
100%.
and then they, of course, come after us, right? And why are they doing that? They're doing that. I think this is important, right? They're doing that for a couple of reasons, and there's some moving parts here, but typically elitists don't want people that they consider tax slaves. I know I'm using inflammatory language, but that's how they view us. They view us as
Oh, absolutely.
just something. We're an organism to feed off of. They
Yeah,
don't want you to have any ability to protect yourself from the horrible wave of crime and violence and violent behavior that they've unleashed on us. They don't think that you should ever be able to project force for any reason. You should be as vulnerable and dependent upon them as possible. That's one big part of it. Because people are
yeah,
like, well, why are they doing this if it's not helping public safety? That's one big part. And the other part is to scare urban voters. So people in large cities, of course, not everybody, but many
yeah,
people, if you're in a large urban environment like that for any length of time, much less your whole life, you become completely decoupled from how the world actually works, where your food comes from, why the lights are always on, what it takes to keep those lights on, what it takes to keep the
yeah,
buses running. They're hungry, they walk to the store, there's food on the shelves. They're scared, they call the police are there in 2 minutes. Like this, the government waves a $400 rebate check. They're like, yeah, you got my vote, right? If they pander to
yeah,
their lifestyle, yeah, you got my vote. So these are the people that the liberals and the NDP and the Bloc and the Greens for their tiny little part in it. These are the people they farm for votes. These are gullible people. They're weak-minded people. Sorry to be a little sharp on it, but it is what it is, and they're easily scared. So the liberals say to these people in urban centers, look at the gun violence you're experiencing. We're taking action on gun violence. We've banned assault style weapons and we froze the market on handguns. And these people are, they're quite ignorant, and they're just like, yeah, this is great. The liberals are the only party that will stand up to the evil gun lobby. And so they don't care what's reality. They don't care how many people get killed. They don't care how many gun clubs that have been around over 100 years get closed, the land sold, and they don't care about this, the destruction of positive Canadian gun culture, which is an essential part of the Canadian social fabric since Canada became a country. They don't care about the destruction of that. It's all about the next election. So you have
yeah.
these two main reasons why they do these things. And at the end of the day, these people don't care what they do, what they destroy, or who they hurt. This is something that happens, I think, to people when they get into politics. It just breaks them, and they become just something unlike, they're not normal people anymore. And that's what we're trying to fight against. And that's what we've been fighting against for 10 years. And it's a real challenge.
Oh, 100%, man. I'm really thankful you're doing what you're doing. And a little bit rewind there, but basically another part of the question was like, so what are the UCP like? I don't know if you've actually had a chance to talk to Pierre Poilievre about what you're doing or some of these MPs. Like, what do they think about your take? I mean, like, what do they have to say? I mean, honestly, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, basically, it's yeah, a total dependency on government, and God forbid we have some ability to defend ourselves or protect our homes. I mean, these conversations need to be had, and it just seems like with the Liberals and NDP, they only look at like the end result, surface level of things, right? Rather than look going deeper and creating a system like basically they've emboldened and empowered like criminals in this country. I call it unaccountable Canada now, you know. It's just a place where, yeah, it's a revolving doors within the jail systems. I mean, you talk to some of these people, it's just absolutely unbelievable. You know, like because Canada to me was like we have so much potential, so much here. And looking at the leadership is an abomination to me. Like it's an absolute abomination. Like that we have like these people can even get into places of power. Like what does that tell you? You know, like the state of the country, right? Like the state of the thinking is just it makes me sad to say the least, you know, and it really does. It's but again, what are the UCP? What are they saying about all this? What do they think, you know? What are they going to do if put into power?
All right. So the Conservative Party of Canada, so it's a CPC for federal, UPC in Alberta,
Sure,
not
yeah.
affiliated,
Yeah.
not affiliated. So the Conservative Party has vowed to reverse everything. This is a direct quote that has been said by Pierre Poilievre over and over and over again, right? So gun owners are like, he never said, what he was going to do. He never made he made the promise 100 times in full view of the media and the opposition to them and the people of Canada to reverse everything the Liberals have done since 2015. So
Okay.
people ask me, I'll go to a show, the Toronto Sportsman Show or an outdoor show somewhere else. People will be like, "Oh, is Poilievre going to fulfill this promise?" And I've only been asked that about 750 times in the last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Like I talked to hundreds of people. Um, and the answer is, yeah, he's going to do it. And the reason he's going to do it is that when, he was floating that message he's been doing it for 3 years. And he's been riding high in the polls no matter what. This latest poll thing, there's a few things going on there. But despite the promise to make assault weapons legal again, as the Liberals like to say, which is completely
Yeah.
untrue, it wasn't having any effect on his polling numbers for years, not just 6 months, not for a month, years.
Yeah.
So there's the the only thing that's going to happen to Poilievre if he doesn't fulfill that promise is he's going to lose his base. He's going to lose support. He's not going to gain any support by going back on that. Liberals are not, and it's funny, I hate using the term liberals because these people aren't liberals. The
Yeah.
people that we
Yeah.
call liberals, these are an
I know what you
entirely
mean.
different
Yeah.
group of people. I'm a
Yeah.
liberal, right? I voted liberal.
Traditional,
I
right?
voted for
Classic,
Paul
right?
Martin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, classic liberals. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
free
get it.
speech.
I get
What
it.
you do in your life's none of my business. Just
Yeah.
be responsible and just normal stuff, right? But
Yeah.
but anyway, the Poilievre will like there are no disaffected liberal voters that would just switch over to Poilievre if he said, okay, yeah, I'm just going to keep the gun ban in place. That's not a thing. So he has no reason not to do it. So I think it'll all happen. We've been working with the Conservatives fairly closely for a long time. We're not a group that is going to drag them down just to puff ourselves up as a group that's looking for members and funding and support. And that's why I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons why we have such a good relationship with them. We're like, you need to win to help us, and we won't let
Yeah.
you down. So, if you want to
Okay.
keep your guns, you have to vote conservative. Even though something I also want to say, Tom, which is important in this conversation. Me personally, I've said this a few times before. For me personally, I have a lot of differences in opinion from the Conservative Party of Canada. There's a lot of issues that they've taken a position on that I have the exact opposite
Okay.
opinion on. Like I do not identify 100% with the Conservatives in their position on a lot of things,
Sure.
especially war, right? Yeah,
Sure.
I'm running the gun lobby and I'm anti-war. Isn't that weird, right? But if you want to keep your guns, if you want your children to have a future, if you want just sort of common sense, and it's not a tagline like the Conservatives comment, like literal common sense, then you only have one place to vote, which is the Conservative Party of Canada. And I'm not a cheerleader. I don't carry water for them. We don't give any money to we've never given a penny to the Conservative Party. They don't pay us. They don't answer to us. But I'll tell you, it's on one, it's a strange crossroads we found ourselves in right now, which is
Hmm.
vote one way. If one party wins, the whole country is just going to slide right into the fires of hell, basically,
Yeah.
metaphorically speaking. If the other party wins, we're going to start crawling back and probably my children will have a future. Like that's literally the choice right now. So it's on guns and it's on a lot of things too.
No, I respect your opinion, Rod. And I'm glad actually you identified yourself like as a classic liberal because I believe like even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would say somewhat of the same kind of thing, at least with respect to being what a traditional liberal used to be, right? And with someone like yourself, like you can actually have an intelligent discussion about issues and find points of agreement, right? Like the problem with, I would say, if you want to call them the far left, is that it's become like I call them like they have their own religion to me that they're like pushing aggressively on everyone else, right? And they don't see the hypocrisy of what to me they've become. When I would say we should at least work towards having some balance like in the conversations and I really believe it's extremely important to table legislation that protects um, traditional Canadians like that I would call yourself traditional gun ownership to me and that's why another one of my questions was are you working on like I would say any legislative proposals or draft bills because I would say someone like yourself would have the ability to do that because I think that that's what we actually need. Um, I'm not sure whether we'll get the buy-in, but if we actually had something written out, that we could actually table to some of these MPs, that we could actually bring this into law and then the system will again start working for us, right? And protect legal gun ownership in Canada. So what do you have to say about that? I don't know whether you do have something on the go, but I mean, I would say you're the man to do that or you're the group to do that because you understand how the system works. And that's what I think part of the solution would be considering where we are now. Because then it's like all of a sudden, okay, they have a legal document together that's well organized, right? That if we can get support from the people too, right, it might actually create some change. At least those are my thoughts on it.
So speaking of how the system works, so here's how it works. Um, to pass legislation, you need a majority government, right? Or
Okay.
a coalition government like the Liberals and the NDP. You need to have the majority of seats of votes in the House of Commons. So now there used to be 338 seats and now there's what is it 142 or something. There's another 4 or 5 new seats, right? There's new riding boundaries that have been drawn. But you need to have the majority of those to pass legislation. And of course that process takes anywhere from 14 months to over 2 years. So first thing, without a majority, like a clear majority conservative government, there is no legislation that's going to get passed that's going to be helpful to us. Only
Yeah.
legislation that's going to get passed is going to be harmful to us, not just with guns, but on many different things like Bill C-75 and Bill C-5, like I talked about, where they let murderers, like literal psychopath murderers out onto the streets to murder other people, right? So that's
Yeah.
the power of legislation. So
Yeah.
so the bad news is, unless we have a majority conservative government, you're getting nothing. So I could be running around. It's funny because there's a political party that's running around saying we've got the best platform. This
Yeah.
will be election number 3 without winning a single seat. Doesn't matter. They could have everybody gets $1 million. We're going to print $10 trillion and everybody gets $1 million, pay off all your bills. That's great. It's like they're never going to do it. So they can promise whatever they want. Right. So
Yeah.
anyway, you need to have a majority in order to get any laws passed. Other than that, you're doing nothing but talking. And I'm sick of talking. I was sick of talking when I started talking. so
I
so
hear you,
anyway,
man.
as far as legislation, the conservatives have, it's my understanding, they have a completely rewritten Firearms Act already that's going to
Okay.
fix almost all the problems. And I'm saying almost because nothing's perfect, but probably virtually all the problems that firearm owners have had with such an inconsistent, ridiculous, self-contradictory Firearms Act that we've been living with for 30 years, 35 years. So it's my understanding they have that already. As far as different proposals, they have everything that we've been giving them over the last 10 years because we've been working with them for 10 years. And they know exactly what we want. And should they win a majority or even a minority government, we will be working with them again on legislation to see if we can get something passed. But it's really important for people to understand how the system works because I get a lot of, I get criticism from people, I get comments, I get all kinds of stuff, right? Like, how come we need a Second Amendment or we need this, we need constitutional, rights. It's like, man, that's not how it works in Canada. We have the Westminster parliamentary system. And what that means, and the last 10 years it's become very clear to most Canadians that in our system, the government can basically do whatever it wants, when it wants, to whoever it wants. Full
Yeah.
stop. There is nothing constraining government power in this British parliamentary system that we have.
Yeah.
Now, the reason, and this is very important, Tom, the reason, because people are like, well, how could this be? It's like, well, this system has been in place for 150 years in Canada, right? And I'll tell you how it could be. Because Canadian culture was I was born here and I'm 56. Throughout my life, at least what I've witnessed, Canadian culture used to be quite stable. And people really understood what it was to be Canadian, and they understood more or less what it took to have a successful country. And we don't need to get into all those values or whatever, right? But what happened was, like let's say 20 years ago, 20 years ago, if you tried to pull some of the crap that the Liberals have pulled, they would have been tossed out of government. I mean, look at the long gun registry and all the stuff that the Liberals were up to. They were reduced. This was what, 4 election cycles ago. They were reduced to the lowest seat count. I think it was 34 seats for the Liberals in the history of elections in Canada. They had never been that low. They were in danger of not being a party. You need 12 seats to be an actual party. So to be recognized as a party. So, the behavior never would have been tolerated. So those cracks in the system that I'm communicating to you right now were never seen, right? No politician would ever be so bold as to pull the crap back then because people wouldn't tolerate it. And most of the people that were involved in politics weren't as dark and demonic as the people that are involved in politics now. Now that we have psychopaths and sociopaths involved in politics, and they don't care about exhibiting the behaviors that they have. Now we're seeing the limitations of our system. We just didn't see them because it wouldn't have been tolerated. Nobody would have even tried before. Now they're like, yeah, we can do anything we want. So let me just give you an example. When the Liberals banned all these guns, right? 1,550 models of assault style firearm, whatever this BS is, back in 2020. They didn't have the authority to do it. That's pretty clear, right? So we sued them. And we filed injunctions. We cross-examined every one of their affiants, like all their witnesses, you could say. We took it to the Liberals like nobody ever took it on behalf of gun owners in the history of the country for 4 years straight. And you know what? And we were right. They did not have the administrative ability to ban these guns. They didn't have the legal ability to do it. At the end, we lost. We lost on everything. And the judge sat back and she's like, in a decision, usually the judge says, here's why this decision was made, and here's the legal foundation. She didn't do that. She was like, here's what the government said. Here's what you said. I agree with the government. So she created this decision that was easy to get an appeal on, I think, just for political reasons. That's just my opinion. And just to delay this whole thing until another election. And so that she wouldn't, I guess, piss the government off, right? Let the Court of Appeal do that. So, it's the government does something that's completely illegal, and it's totally appropriate for them to do that. They've escaped accountability for that for 5 years. Yeah. We've spent $2.7 million fighting them. It's not over yet. We're waiting for a decision from the Court of Appeal. But that's the power the government has. They can do whatever. Same with the Emergencies Act, if you remember. Even though it was declared illegal, no accountability, no consequences of any type of anything, right? So now we're in the Court of Appeal with our case. The Court of Appeal, we have a really good feeling about this because the Court of Appeal are not people that phone it in like you'd find at the Federal Court of Canada. These are the high performers. These are the best of the best, right? Like one step below the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court have even made weird decisions. But it looks like we are going to win this. The government didn't have that ability, but whatever. The court's going to make their decision. But you usually get a decision from the Court of Appeals. I don't know, 3 months. This is not a complicated case. Maybe 3 months. Well, it's been 4 months, 4.5 months almost. Yeah, 4 months.
And
We
they're
haven't heard anything. And now we're in election period. It's almost like they're holding that decision until after an election. And that's interesting to me. That just says, like, what what are the conditions in which the court are like, well, there's an election coming, like that's political. So now you can't run to the judiciary for justice, in my opinion, at least at this point, until I
I
see
agree.
something to the contrary. So, if you just look at all these things in their totality, I mean, what kind of a system is it? Right. So in our system, they can pretty much do whatever they want. And so you're not going to get rights until this system is gone in its entirety. And there's no actual legal way to do that other than separation, other than some kind of breakup of Canada, and you establish a new country with with codified rights and all the rest of that stuff. So anyway, I think it's just important that people understand how all this stuff works. So as the gun lobby guys are like, how come you're not pushing for concealed carry? It's like, bud, we don't even have handguns anymore. We don't
Yeah.
even have semi-autos anymore, including semi-auto 22s. What do you mean? How come I'm not pushing for concealed carry? Our system, there's no way, no path forward for that right now. So conservative government gets them, if they get a majority, which doesn't look likely, but we can't give up now. We're that close to the finish line. We got to actually put our foot to the floor. We get a conservative majority, we can repeal all this legislation, start moving the ball forward, and that's the best we can do. So it's just important that people, I know everyone's frustrated, but you have to understand how the system works, because there's no way out of the system without the country breaking up. Maybe that's plan B, but if we don't get a satisfying election, but that's where we are right now.
Wow. Yeah.
Sorry for the
I
long
mean,
answer, Tom, but I mean, it's just, these
no,
are
no,
complicated
man, like
things, right?
this is awesome. I really appreciate your insight. It's educational, right? It really helps the thinking because we don't really get much of a good education, obviously, from mainstream media. What I found really interesting about some of your responses was that the judge didn't actually give you the legal framework as to why, they're your case isn't moving forward and they're just siding with the government. See, the way that you put that, I thought was really, that's exactly right. Because it's just she wants to side with the government. It's not based on what the actual legality of it is, right? Which is why you built your entire case. And see, what does that tell you? It's like, yeah, like that, it's like the system we have is an illusion. And to me, you're making your case proves that on a level. Depending on what happens with the Court of Appeals. But legally, to me, you're in the right as far as I'm concerned, right? But it's interesting seeing how people in positions of power, like, yeah, it's your job to provide the legal structure as to why you're dismissing your case or whatever, right? Whatever it may be, I mean, but it's just a circus show, and I agree with you basically. I actually really agree with what you said about that basically the option for Canada because the political party you were talking about, I was actually involved with the PPC a while back, right? Which I'm not now, but I've come to basically agree with your line of thinking um, that this is the option for Canada. Like you said too, that you don't agree with necessarily every point that they stand for, which I don't either. But I would tend to agree with you, and I've come to your alignment of thinking that this is the option for Canada. And if we can't get them in, then I'm basically, yeah, on the board on board with creating something of our own. Which can we do that? I don't know. I know there's many people out there working on that too, but there's a lot of talk. But how are we actually going to bring that into being? I have no idea. But yeah, man, I think you're a guy to be listened to about all this. And actually, I'd love to see a guy like you as a politician, I think you'd be great. Like people like yourself, as far as I'm concerned, of the types of people that I would vote for, because I actually think that your reasoning, you have intelligent arguments, intelligent reasoning, you're balanced, and that's what we need here, right? We need to get rid of these, I'm going to call them the far left lunatics that to me, yeah, basically created a system with a zero accountability. There's no moral compass left. It's a real shame. It's a real shame what's going on.
Yeah,
But okay,
it's a disaster. It's an
yeah,
unmitigated disaster, and it's really disheartening where,
yeah,
the situation that we're in now, where you have people, if you watch mainstream media, they'll interview people standing in line to meet Carney or whatever, and you listen to them talk, and it's terrifying.
yeah.
It's a cult, right? It's cult
Well, it
thinking.
is, and it's
The
like when
minute
you
the
look
minute you
at,
try to say, well, hey, do you think it's a problem that the federal government right now is paying $4 billion a month, $52 billion a year in interest payments alone on this debt, which has more than doubled in the last 10 years. Like we owe, what is it, $1.2 trillion for a country of 40 million people? Like this is a problem. Like this is an existential problem. And they'll be like, what are you, a Trump supporter? And you're like, what?
oh yeah,
What?
yeah,
Like,
I know.
this is where we are, right? And it's taken a good 20 years of, well, it's more than 20 years, I would imagine, but and of course, most recently and most intensely, the last 10 years that again, I don't like inflammatory terms, but I can support the things I say. It's literally psychological warfare that people have been under
Yeah,
for the last 10 years, designed to break them. And certainly COVID broke a lot of people. And
yeah,
the divisive language and the contradiction and the hypocrisy, like the hypocritical dialogue from the liberals.
yeah,
They'll engage in some horrible behavior themselves, and while they're engaging in it, they'll accuse the conservatives of doing it. And when the conservatives actually aren't doing it, and it breaks people. Well, the weak
yeah.
people, right? It breaks them. And so yeah, we're in a really tough spot. And I don't know
We
how
are.
this all actually is going to come. I don't know what the result is going to be.
Neither do I, and I've it does make me sad, and of course I can send out my prayer, and I try to do my part with the little sphere of influence that I have. Um, but yeah, I think we really need to work hard at finding points of agreement instead of points of division. And that's what I think is really key. I mean, obviously we're not going to agree on everything, but I think initially how the United States formed anyway, it's like I think it's really important to okay, let's figure out like maybe 20 points that we want to codify into law, right? That we can all agree on. And I think it's possible, right? But of course, with social media too, today, it's like you've got all these subdivisions and divisions and subdivisions from there, and then it just never stops. It's completely out of control too. It just it's really is quite a terrifying world that we live in now. And it is a time where we need some really strong, I would say, good moral, good character, strong ethical people. Bringing back some law and order, into our systems is what I would like to see happen. But
Well,
again, like you said, talk is
what's
cheap,
interesting,
right?
Tom, is we talk about the left as being lunatics, and you know, I think the facts bear out that they are, right. So to be honest with
I
you, and
I
I can
think they
defend
are,
that,
yeah.
right. It's not me throwing a pejorative out, but we have our equivalents on the hard right. We have
Sure,
people
yeah,
that are disconnected from reality, ranting and raving about all kinds of different things, right. And it's the difference even in the firearms community, actually, the division. I term these people the enemy within, because they're like,
sure,
so I'll give you an example. When the CCFR started, they're like, what about licensing? What's your position on licensing? I'm like, I don't like firearm regulation, but there should be regulations where they make sense, where you can say, hey, this makes all the sense in the world and it's not prohibitive. And the regulation that's just meant to be punitive, that needs to go away. Right. So very
sure,
easy. But I think on the hard right of the political spectrum, and apparently that's a victory. They're like, oh, you're a compromiser. And it's like, well, wait a minute, man. The whole world works on compromise because there's more than two people, right? Like that's
yeah. I hear
we
you.
all have to compromise in order to share the same space. But I think I heard someone explain this as this interesting. You might find this interesting. that we tend to be broken into a couple of groups. There's destinationalists, and there's directionalists. So I'm a directionalist. I look at the problem and I'm like, okay, well, the Conservative Party aren't perfect. There's a lot of people involved that are true politicians. Like I don't like politicians overall,
Hmm.
but there are real politicians as diabolical in the Conservative Party somewhere as there are in the Liberal Party, just on the other side of the political spectrum. People that are there just for their own reasons, that will literally do anything to win and to stay in power. But for me, I look at, like you were just saying, what are some tenets, some basic tenets that we can agree on? Let's
Yeah.
start pushing it in that direction. Whereas you have people that are such purists where they're like, oh, you know what? I agree with you on 89% of things, but you know what? That last 11%, it's a
Yeah,
deal
I know.
breaker. There's no place for you in our group because you don't agree with this 11%, right? There are things
Yeah, I
that
know.
that you and I would talk about, and I would be like, I don't know. I don't know, Tom. I don't think I see it that way. And here's why. But
Sure.
that's okay because both of us can still go, I think, un, uncontrolled government debt is probably a problem. There'll be no money left for programs and for benefits or services if we're spending it all on interest. No. And then you and I would say,
Hmm.
okay, well, I think we can agree that that's, unbridled government, irresponsible government spending is probably a
Sure.
problem. So I think I think everyone needs to check themselves that they're not, destinationalists, that where they're not like either you agree 100% or
Hmm.
you and I have nothing left to talk about. And that's what I found with the political party that you're talking about. I was very excited about that political party when it started. In fact, I
Yeah.
voted for its leader when he was running for the leadership of the CPC. In fact, I bought memberships for my whole family so that we could try to get him in. So it's not like I
Yeah.
have something against Max to name him, right? I got nothing
You
against
know,
Max. I really liked him. The problem is they built a very small tent, and you're not allowed in there unless you agree 100% with their ideology. They've turned out to be something just as bad as, like, let's say, the NDP. So it's like you have to build a big tent. There has to be room for disagreement. There has to be room for conversation. You have to put in effort to meet people more than halfway. And when everybody does that, wow, we could really agree on a lot of things and we get a lot of work done. So that's what has to be done in our political landscape in Canada, our social landscape, on the firearms issue, on fiscal
yeah.
responsibility, on all kind of freedom. Like there are compromises to be made with each other so we can all live together. So I don't know if we can all embrace that, then a lot of our problems could be solved fairly quickly.
Well, basically, I agree with that because even though, like I said before, that we're not going to agree on everything, but we do need to find common ground, or else you're just going to create tribes that essentially won't accomplish anything.
Yeah.
Is where I'm at now.
Hmm.
Because so I would tend to agree with you, and it's difficult. I mean, everyone's free to make the decisions that they want to make according to the convictions of their own conscience. But when I look at it logically for where we are now, like I tend to agree with what you're saying about the CPC, right? And the situation we're in Canada right now. But of course, others on the other side will say, well, they're pushing this and I don't like it. So therefore they throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's
Yeah.
what happens. But
Hmm.
then it's like, well, what are you doing? I mean, like, Canada's in a very, like, if I look at it overall, the bigger picture, yeah, we're in a really, really, really bad place. And it does make me sad. And I'm going to try, yeah, like, I mean, if I was working with someone like you, I feel like we could actually solve some problems. And this is how it should be, but it's a shame that it's not. But I mean, I do appreciate the way that you make your case, right? And I think that that's exactly how, our politicians should be looking at steering the nation. But I don't know, like I always remember when Trudeau said, about 10 years ago, it's never left my mind. He said that Canada has no mainstream, no core identity, first post national state, right? I mean, that, like, people have brushed it off now, but to me, that is exactly the way this man thinks. And I would say that a lot of these, I'm going to loosely call them, like, the globalists, the elitists
Hmm.
think. And, we are being pushed and steered, in that direction. And you can see it by what's allowed to take place in this country now and our traditional value system, as far as I see it as basically being disintegrated. And I don't like it. But at the same time, I'm willing to work with people that at least we can agree on a few things and not bunker down as like basically an island unto myself, right? So I'll leave it at that. I think that was a good exchange, like with what's going on. But I basically tend to agree with you. And it's taken me a long time because I was like that guy that'll just be, I'm dying on this hill and I don't have a problem with that. But also I can see the downside to that position. You need to be wise and you need to be smart with your approach as well. I can hats off to you. Okay, you've got courage, you've got fortitude in the position you want to take, but like you said, man, we got to try and work with each other and agree on certain things, right? Like some overall things that'll at least protect at least some of the values that we want to keep going for our the next generations. But
Well, yeah, and it's a real challenge, and the problem that I think people get locked into is they're like it's all or nothing, and it's like,
yeah,
well, the
yeah,
world
that's
is
right.
more
Zero
than
or one.
happy. Yeah, the world is more than happy to give you nothing. Like
Yeah,
that's the easiest. It's funny is because that again, this is something from the past of the in the firearms community where it was like no compromise, and it's like okay, well, so all or nothing. Guess what we've gotten over the last 10 years? Nothing.
yeah,
We've lost almost everything by taking
yeah,
that approach. It's like, okay, well, what can be done? How can we get there? Let's get that first, right? It's almost like you have to climb up to that next ledge in order to see the ledge after that. Whereas guys are like, no, we belong up there and I'll accept nothing less. And it's like, okay, well, you're still, look at that. 10 years later, you're still standing in the same spot, screaming the same things. And
yeah,
again, people are still not listening to you. So you have to be reasonable. You have to work with people and we have to move the needle in the right direction. And that starts with small things. And then once we get there, now we have a platform to springboard to the next one, right? And I think it's going to be the same for the country. Will everything
yeah,
get if we were so fortunate as to get even a minority conservative government, what that does is it stops the bleeding. I think this is what a lot of people maybe on the far I don't even like the far right thing, but hey, let's just say the
sure.
more passionate people in the right of this political spectrum. What they don't understand is number one, your small party can't even get a seat, so it doesn't matter. It's
Yeah,
insignificant. You're not capable of winning a majority or a minority. You're not capable of winning a seat so far, right? So anyway,
yeah,
I could probably fix that. I think like there's ways that can be fixed, but anyway, this is not a group of people that are willing to listen. But by electing a conservative, even a conservative minority government, you stop the bleeding. Like that's
mhm.
right now, like going back to what I said, right? People are like, well, what about suppressors? What about concealed carry? We need CCW. And it's like, hey, man,
Yeah,
we
we're
need
we're
to
a long way
stop.
from that.
Yeah, we need to stop the bleeding first, right? So
Yeah,
if a conservative minority is elected, the order and council stuff will probably go away, which is great, go away fairly quickly. The legislation won't because they don't have a majority, but the bleeding is stopped. We won't lose anything less and we'll get some stuff back. Then we'll have, I don't know, whatever. Minority governments tend to go about 3 years. They don't ever go 4 years, I guess, unless you're the liberals and Justin Trudeau. But then we start working towards the next goal, which is getting a majority conservative government and repealing all that legislation and fixing the Firearms Act and at the same time fixing all these other things too, right? So it's like
yeah.
I'm just hoping that I'm conveying that vision of how
Oh
things work
yeah,
in the real world to people that are, and I understand why a lot of people take the position there that they do because they're angry. They're so angry and they're so fed
yeah.
up with losing so much. And I'm telling you, Tom, I'm so angry too that I could barely control it some days. Like I'm no different than anybody else. I just don't, it's not going to help gun owners if I show that to
No,
the
I
public.
agree.
So I don't. And there's a word for that. It's called professionalism. But
Yeah,
still, I'm just as angry as everybody else, probably just thinking just as radically as some of the more radical people, that are
yeah,
thinking, I'm like, yeah, man, is that what it's going to take? But at the same time, it's like we gotta focus on the task at hand. We have to keep pushing our agenda slowly and steadily. And this is a long race. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But that's how this gets fixed. So anyway, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, you've accurately assessed what like what I'm going to call the enemy, right? But you're operating with the legal framework in place. Like that's what you do. And I give you credit for that because I think that that's needed. Like and I do hope that the outcome you're looking for does come into being, the CPC gets into power and then like if in seeing some of these gun rights legislation change, if we get a majority, I agree with that. I do. And it's taken a lot. I've learned pretty well everything the hard way. But I've realized now as I've become an older, it's very important to listen. It's very, very, very important you don't have to compromise your belief system. You're allowed to disagree, but I agree with your approach that we need to at least like I would say unite under common sense and even to your points too about the PPC not being able to gain a seat. I mean, I've watched that and part of that too, it's like, I really respect what he did, over the COVID era. I really do. His stand, his position on things. But like Canadians overall, haven't gone that route. So like it's even though I agree with a lot of the platform points, but like you look at like what they've been able to accomplish, and I know the main argument the CPC has against them is, you're splitting the vote. I mean, to me, you're entitled to vote for whoever you want, but I can understand that argument,
Well, it's true.
because at the end of the day,
It's true.
yeah, I mean, I get it, and they won't like that, but it's too bad. It's too bad. I feel like I've given them I gave them a chance, and it really hasn't produced the fruit that I was looking for. And to me, I've readjusted. Like you said, it's not that I agree with everything the CPC is doing. I certainly don't. But at the same time, I would rather see them. I think the logical thinking is to see them come back into power and country. I think that that's the best option for us. So,
At least in the interim, right? So again, you got to
yeah.
stop the bleeding, and then you can start looking at,
Well,
at what's
that's where I'm
next.
at.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
whether yeah, I that's where I'm at in my thinking. And so it is what it is. And it's like I said, like I have no problem stating my views where I stand, but I'm not interested in following, yeah, like road groups, if you will, like that I don't see really accomplishing too much anymore. I'm just done with that. So, but okay, I know we've talked for quite a while here. We pretty well touched on all the questions. There was just one other one too. Like you talked to a lot of military and RCMP uh, personnel in Canada, right? I'm sure. Like, just what's their take on all this? Like, how do they feel about all this? Like being like an officer too, and it's like, man, like all our gun rights are rolling back. Like, how do they feel about all this? Military members and stuff. Can you just speak a little bit to that, and then we'll wrap it up with one last
Well,
question after that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, police and military they're just like everybody, any other group in the general population, right? Some are going to agree with the idea that
Yeah.
civilians should have access to firearms, and others are going to have an elitist approach where it's like, no, 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 I get guns, you don't get anything, right? And there are those
Okay.
people there. I worked with police for quite a while, and I don't know, man. I would, if I were to speculate, I'd say it's 50-50. And
Okay.
typically
Yeah.
it's 50-50 in frontline police officers, I think, where you have guys that are gun owners themselves and are like, yeah, this is BS and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you have, I've also worked with police where there's like the law's the law and my job's to enforce the law. And I'm like, okay. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you've thought that through. That means kicking people's doors in and pointing guns at them like law abiding citizens because they haven't done anything to deserve it other than they were fined one day and now they're a hardened criminal in unauthorized possession of prohibited firearm the next day based on the government's
Yeah.
opinion. Like, have you thought
Yeah.
that through? And some guys are like, yeah, as long as I get to ride around in the Bearcat and wear all the cool gear and boot doors in and that's fine for me. Like there are guys like that out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. For
but what
sure.
I find is the brass are very different than the frontline guys. The brass, like the RCMP, I have nothing good to say about them at the management level, at the brass level. I have nothing positive to say about them.
Hmm.
They, if you do a lot of research into the RCMP and their relationship with the government, like how the RCMP started and how the government and the RCMP both, ended up taking their
Yeah.
respective control of their respective portfolios in the governance of Canada. You can see this entwined, almost like the judiciary to some extent, this entwined, twisted kind of strange relationship there. And I think that's why the RCMP brass are more than happy to just ban guns based on variant status. And what is a variant? The federal court, Judge Gagne, in our case, actually, in the beginning, in the early days of our court case, was like, what? Variant? Well, how do you define a variant? They're like, it's undefined. We define it as in real time whenever we decide to. So if we think it's like if this gun is a variant of this one, if it has interchangeable parts, good, it's a variant. If it has nothing, no conceivable similarities anyway, that's a variant as well. If we say it is, and, and the RCMP uses that, and they are absolutely happy with that. They don't see that that's a problem in a functioning democracy, right? Or a system that people can respect. Like these are a group of people that they don't see any consequences to treating people like cattle. And,
Yeah. And
so overall, we have a lot of support from police. You even now have police unions and actual police forces like Durham coming out to say, vote for the Conservatives if you want to stop the blood from running in the streets and the home invasions and the car thefts and the trafficking and the child porn and all that stuff. Vote Conservative. Like police forces are actually coming out, getting directly into politics and advocating for a political party because they are so desperate to stop the violence and the crime. So, I commend them. I support them absolutely. But it's complicated, right? So it's just, you have good
sure.
and bad in every group in Canada. And I think the same happens in police and military too.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no, thanks again, yeah, for those insights. And okay, so we'll wrap up with this one. Number 8. Like just tell us about your podcast and mybesthunt.ca. I saw that. That's pretty kind of cool stuff. So yeah, talk a little bit about that. I mean, you're doing all kinds of stuff, man. Like I'm super impressed, right? You got all kinds of things on the go. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So the CCFR, we do a bunch of projects. We're actually spending $400,000 in third party advertising in the election. So our ads are showing on Global, on Bell, on Rogers. We're even having Mark Carney attack ads in the Stanley Cup playoffs, actually, in the playoff games.
Nice.
So yeah, we're spending a lot of money. It's an unprecedented amount. The gun lobby in Canada, in the history of the country, has never had resources enough to do that. And so fortunately, the CCFR is fairly well supported, although we're blowing a big chunk of our war chest on that, almost all of that disposal
It's a
going
lot,
to
yeah.
ad.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but
Yeah.
right now it's all or nothing. We also have that television show, CCFR Radio on the Air on Wild TV, and it's fourth season. We're nearing the end of season 4. We'll see if there'll be a season 5, if there's any guns to even talk about or
Yeah.
politics that
Yeah, we might
relevant
have
politics to
slingshots
talk
left
about.
by then, right?
Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
And then we have our podcast, which is great. And then I have my own television show on Wild TV called My Best Hunt, and it's a hunting show, interestingly enough. And I don't do any hunting in it, which is kind of just the way I like it. So basically, the show is I bring hunters from YouTube and television
Okay.
into the studio in Chilliwack, British Columbia, and they tell me the story of their best hunt ever, and they bring all of their B-roll from that hunt.
Nice.
And so they tell me the story in this nice, warm kind of log cabin atmosphere while we show little select clips of actually what happened. And it's a very original format. Everyone has been really excited about it. It premiered a week ago on Wild TV, so it's running for 6 months in its first season, and
Nice.
I've already committed to season 2, and it seems like the response is really great. So anyway.
That's good. People love that stuff, man. Yeah, no, you're doing lots of great things. And yeah, I really appreciate, man. Yeah, everything you're doing because you're taking it beyond just obviously the conversational level. And so yeah, man, I honestly think you should probably work with the CPC, get involved with them. And I mean, you'd definitely be someone that I'd be interested in having, like if I was in a place of government, right? Because I mean, you speak for a lot of people, right? And you've got a really nice balanced approach to the whole gun ownership thing. And I do agree with a lot of things Canada does, like going to get your license and all that, taking some training, and these are good things, right? We can create our own system. Like that's how I look at it. Like we don't have to do exactly what the Americans are doing. I mean, we can do our own thing. It's just, like again, the thing that I believe the country lacks the most now is I'm going to say constitutional law, like something that like similar to the United States. There's something that's
Mhm.
this is our core identity, our mainstream, and it really when Trudeau spoke those words, I said that says it all about
Yeah.
this country to me,
Well,
in
it was a
my mind,
slap in the
in my opinion.
face. And our
Yeah, and I
system,
mean, there's people that are totally fine with that.
yeah.
But see,
Yeah.
obviously we're not. But like this is the battle, right? It's a battle of the wills.
Yeah.
And like people think, I can't do anything. Yes, you can. We all have a sphere of influence. I feel it's all depends how you play the hand that you've been dealt. Like I'll put it that way. Just you can do something like you can support Rod. You can, every little bit counts. To me, I don't write off anyone and everyone's circumstances are different. But if you have that attitude that you've already lost the fight and you can't do anything, well, then you have lost, right? And you can't do anything because you think that. So don't think that, think that you can have a little bit of influence. I really believe every individual can do something. But okay, yeah. So basically, we'll probably wrap it up. But I mean, you can be found on, yeah, you got a website, firearmsrights.ca. You're on Facebook. I mean, you're on X. I mean, you got your websites. I mean, where do you want people to come and find you? What's your number one go-to?
Well, they can always check out our podcast on YouTube or on Spotify or iTunes or Rumble or Facebook
Everywhere. Yeah.
or Minds. You can always check us out on X, Twitter. We're on we're on Blue Sky. We opened a Blue Sky account, and that's been entertaining, right? Because this is a liberal. Again, I hate using they've stolen,
Sure. Yeah.
the
It's
liberal
fine. I
identity, but
get
anyway,
it.
it's a hard left echo chamber, so that's always interesting. But we're on all the social media, and if you want to support the work of the CCFR, we it's all for members and donations. That's everything that we've done, millions upon millions of dollars worth of projects over the last 9 years, all just from people supporting us, one member at a time for $40 for a membership or shooting us $20 or
Mhm.
whatever. And
It all
yeah, if you
helps.
want to help our organization, you do that at ccfr.ca. That's probably the easiest place to go.
Nice.
Oh, you know what,
No.
Tom? Tom, one more thing.
Mhm.
If people are curious what it is that the CCFR is doing or has done, I almost forgot, man. Um, as an organization, we're probably like, well, certainly no other gun lobby group has ever done it. And I don't know if other nonprofits do it. But if you go to our website, ccfr.ca, up at the top, I think it's on the left-hand side, there's a button that says why join. If you click that, you can scroll down. We keep a running list of everything that we've done since we started in 2015. So, and
Okay.
these are just the major projects, right? Like none of this has to do with actually running the organization, which is a pile of work, but you can see all of our major projects for the last 10 years and you scroll all the way to the most recent is right at the bottom and the first stuff is right at the top, but there's no mystery. You don't have to be like, well, we're working quietly behind the scenes. That's why it looks like we're not doing anything, but we're actually really working. We're not, it's not rhetorical. Like we're doing the heavy lifting for gun owners. Like we don't do that stuff. We do projects and we do everything we can think of. So if you're interested to know what we've done and what we are doing, just scroll down that list. There's a pile of stuff there. So it's not a mystery.
No, for sure. Yeah, you're very transparent and authentic. I like that. Those are the types of people I like talking to, right? You're just kind of doing your own thing. It's out there and that's to me, like people like you are the catalysts for change. And the good thing with you too, I don't see you that you operate within these tribal echo chambers. And that's one thing like I have my position, my views, but I do encourage people to follow people that are on the opposite side of the spectrum. I do a whole lot of that on X too, and it's at least you get an understanding of the thinking behind why certain people take the opposite side of the spectrum, and that's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, you need to know where you stand as well. But it's good to know the tactics of those who are going to be your enemies in this fight is the way I look at it too. But thanks, Rod. Yeah, I appreciate everything you've discussed here, man. I think you should run for political office personally. I think you'd be a great candidate. Like a lot of people know who you are, right? So and it's good, right? Because then you have people that are bringing, what at least what the gun owners want to see happen, right? To I don't know, the political battlefield, if I can put it that way, even though you're already doing that. But yeah, again, thanks, Rod. Appreciate everything you're doing, man, and thanks for the talk. Thanks for your time. So we'll sign off here. And
Sounds great. Well, it was my pleasure, Tom. I appreciate it.
oh yeah, thanks very much.